January 22nd, 1879. The African sun rises over a mountain the Zulu call Isandlwana. The little hand, its shadow stretches across the plains like a dark omen. Beneath it, 1,800 British and colonial soldiers wake to what they believe will be another ordinary day in their unstoppable march across Zululand. They are the pride of the British Empire, armed with breech-loading rifles, artillery, and the unshakable confidence of men who have conquered half the world. But they don't know what's watching them. Hidden in the valleys, behind the hills, moving like a storm across the grasslands, are 20,000 Zulu warriors. By sunset, this camp will be destroyed. Nearly every man will be dead, and the British Empire will suffer one of its most humiliating defeats in history. This is the story of Isandlwana, the day the world learned that courage, strategy, and unity could shatter even the mightiest army. This is the darkest day in British colonial history. Let's rewind. How did the most powerful empire on Earth find itself facing annihilation on an African plain? It starts with one man, Lord Chelmsford, the British commander in South Africa. A man so confident, so blinded by imperial arrogance, that he believed the Zulu would never dare face British guns in open battle. Chelmsford had a simple plan: invade Zululand, crush King Cetshwayo's forces, annex the territory. Just another chapter in Britain's endless expansion. On January 11, 1879, he issued an ultimatum to the Zulu king, an ultimatum designed to be rejected. Disband your army, accept British rule, surrender your sovereignty. Cetshwayo refused, and so Chelmsford marched. His army was divided into 3 columns. He led the center column, the strongest, over 4,000 men. Cannons, rocket batteries, the finest weapons of the age. But here's the fatal mistake. Chelmsford underestimated his enemy. He thought the Zulu were primitive, that their spears and shields were no match for British firepower, that they would scatter at the first volley. He was catastrophically wrong. On the morning of January 22nd, Chelmsford split his forces. He took half his men to chase what he thought was the main Zulu army. He left only 1,800 men behind to guard the camp at Isandlwana. No fortifications, no laager, no defensive perimeter. Chelmsford dismissed them. The Zulu won't attack, and even if they do, our rifles will cut them down. But what Chelmsford didn't know was that the largest Zulu army ever assembled was already there, hiding, waiting, watching. Let me take you inside that Zulu impi, that war formation. 20,000 men, divided into regiments, each with its own name, its own history, its own honor to defend. They moved in the traditional bull's horns formation, Indlu at the center, the chest, the horns on each side, ready to encircle, the loins at the back, the reserve. These were not untrained warriors. They were disciplined, battle-hardened, led by commanders who understood tactics better than most British officers, and they were motivated. This wasn't just a battle. This was a defense of their homeland, their king, their way of life. A young warrior named Zulu later recalled, "We did not want war, but when the white men came with their guns and their greed, we had no choice. We would fight, and we would show them that the Zulu do not kneel." On the night of January 21st, the Zulu impi hid in the Ngwebeni Valley, just 5 miles from the British camp. They sat in total silence, no fires, no noise, 20,000 men invisible to the world, waiting for the right moment. That moment came the next morning. A British scouting party stumbled upon them by accident. They crested a hill and froze. Below them, filling the valley like a dark sea, sat the entire Zulu army. For a moment, no one moved. And then, the Zulu rose. What happens when 20,000 warriors stand up as one? What sound does that make? The British scouts would never forget it. The ground seemed to shake. The air filled with the thunder of shields striking the earth. And then they charged. But here's the question. Could 1,800 British soldiers, armed with the best weapons in the world, hold them off? Let's find out. Back at the camp, the British had no idea what was coming. Colonel Pauline was in command, a cautious man, but not a battlefield commander. He'd never led men in combat. When word arrived that the Zulu were attacking, he didn't believe it at first. But then he saw them. Thousands, tens of thousands, moving across the plain like a wave. He ordered his men into a firing line. Fix bayonets, prepare to fire. At first, it worked. The Martini Henry rifles roared. Zulu warriors fell by the dozens. The British volleys were precise, deadly. One soldier, Private Williams, later wrote, "We fired until our rifles burned our hands. They kept coming. We dropped 10, 20, and still they came. I'd never seen such courage, or such terror." But here's what the British didn't understand. The Zulu tactics. The horns were moving. While the chest absorbed the fire, the horns, the left and right flanks, were circling around the camp, encircling, surrounding, cutting off escape. And then the ammunition started running out. This is where everything falls apart. The British supply system was a disaster. Ammunition boxes were sealed with screws. In the chaos, soldiers couldn't open them fast enough. Officers shouted for more bullets. Quartermasters fumbled with tools. Men at the firing line began to panic. And the Zulus saw it. They surged forward. The firing line began to collapse. What happened next was brutal. The Zulu warriors broke through the British line. Hand-to-hand combat erupted across the camp. Spears against bayonets. Shields against rifle butts. The British soldiers fought desperately. But they were overwhelmed. Colonel Durnford, one of the British commanders, made a last stand near a dry riverbed. He and his men formed a circle, fired until their ammunition ran out, then drew their pistols, then their swords. None survived. Across the camp, men tried to flee. Some mounted horses and rode for their lives. But the Zulu were faster. They ran them down, dragged them from their saddles. A teenage Zulu warrior named Uguku later said, "We did not want to kill, but they came to our land. They burned our kraals, killed our brothers. We had to show them. We are Zulu. We do not surrender." By mid-afternoon, it was over. The camp was silent. Smoke rose from burning tents. Bodies lay everywhere. British, colonial, Zulu. Over 1,300 British and colonial troops were dead. Only a handful escaped. The Zulu had lost around 1,000 men. But they had won. They had defeated the British Empire. When news reached Lord Chelmsford, he couldn't believe it. He rushed back to the camp. What he found was a scene of absolute devastation. One officer wrote, "I have seen battlefields before, but nothing like this." The silence was the worst part. No birds, no wind, just death. Isandlwana sent shockwaves across the world. In London, the defeat was met with disbelief. How could this happen? How could 20,000 savages destroy a British army? But those who were there knew the truth. The Zulu were not savages. They were warriors, strategists, defenders of their homeland. They had used terrain, discipline, and unmatched courage to achieve the impossible. But the victory came at a cost. The British sent reinforcements, more soldiers, more guns, more artillery. 6 months later, the Zulu kingdom fell. King Cetshwayo was captured. His nation was divided and colonized. But Isandlwana was never forgotten. It remains a symbol, a reminder that empires are not invincible, that courage and unity can break even the strongest armies. Today, the battlefield is a memorial. Cairns mark where men fell, Zulu and British, side by side. And if you stand there at dawn, when the sun rises over Isandlwana, the little hand, you can almost hear it. The thunder of 20,000 warriors, the crack of rifles, the cries of men who fought for their homes. This was Isandlwana, the day 20,000 Zulu warriors broke the British Army, the darkest day in British colonial history, and one of the greatest military victories Africa has ever known. Remember their names. Remember their courage. Because this is history the world tried to forget. But we won't let it die.